Hey, welcome to the Holler today. I'm Kim Surgent. I'm the Social Studies Instructional Specialist for the KVEC region. And what I'm doing today, especially after all the excitement of the summit the last couple of weeks, people have been going back in and watching those videos. I'm going to go into one of the projects that were presented that day, and it's from Debbie Napier at Ross Point Elementary in Harlan County, Kentucky. So she has done a continuation or an extension of her initial project from 3 years ago that I worked with her on. And we worked with students looking at sources, text, and most importantly, task that helped them understand the evidence and everything they were bringing together to learn about the Harlan County coal industry. This is her third year, so each year she's building on that, which is a phenomenal idea. So that being said, let's watch the video together and kind of talk about some of those important things that have happened, and we're going to make sure that we're very intentional, or I am, I'm going to let you guys know when she's really connecting to those new social studies standards that we've got. So let's take a look.
Oh, I'm Debbie Napier.
There we go.
And I'm going to share our grant, which was entitled Sewing a Bridge to Appalachian History, Economic Success, and Cultural Awareness. But with the decline in that coal industry, our population's decreased, and there's been some job loss from this diminishing coal industry, and that forces a lot of our young people to go away from home for job opportunities. They go to college and
so within the first 1 minute and 43 seconds, she's already identifying how she is going to take a look at where she lives, and she's going to talk about how they live because of where they live. So there's that geographical component within this, which definitely connects with our Kentucky standards. But most importantly, she's talking about looking at those times when her community was part of a national narrative. What's really, I think, phenomenal about this is that you can see that she's had much intention in connecting with the history and the geography. And again, with our new standards, we've got to make sure that we're not teaching things in silo. We're not doing a geography unit, then a history unit, then an econ unit. So in reality, because she's looking at coal production and how, and she just said, and many of our children have to move away for jobs, now she's making that economic connection. So if I were watching this, knowing my standards the way I do, I would say, I'm gonna watch this because there's a real good chance I'm gonna use this in my classroom.
What ways can innovative technology contribute to Harlan County school children overcoming the stigma of living in a poverty area and build personal self-esteem and pride in their communities? How can it help them learn to sew and quilt and encourage them to explore with inquiry and research to develop living history roles?
Okay, so Debbie has proposed her research question, so let's look at that. And it's a broad one, it's a big one, but there is definitely a sequential nature to it, or an order to how she asks these questions. I want to break those down really quick. And I think for me that we don't realize sometimes because our kids, especially in the Eastern Kentucky region or in some other poverty-stricken areas, that when you talk to those children, sometimes they'll just say, "Well, we're just." And I think I've actually had a student say to me before, "We're just hillbillies," or "We're just from Neon," or "We're just from Harlan County." And that just is a whole lot of surrendered power. So we don't want our kids to do that. We want our kids to say, "I am from Harlan County. I am from Neon." And one way to do that is to take us into the next step in this, which is build personal self-esteem and pride in their community. Because we are poverty-stricken, we don't realize that there was a time when we had made a tremendous impact and, most importantly, contribution to our country and its history. So we kind of sit back now because now we don't have a lot of jobs. It's like, well, what's our purpose? But in reality, there's a reason that you're living there and that your ancestors lived there, because there was a huge purpose at one time, especially when you look at Harlan County. So when I see this, I know that if you're going to, and the best way to do that, when you're looking at equity and access, place-based education is the best way to do that. And Debbie has completely honed in on that, which then, of course, is going to address the social emotional learning. When students are developing that pride, and they start feeling, that engagement, that's going to lead to civic engagement. That's going to lead to taking action, which is the next part, because they're going to learn, they're going to go back to a skill that, let's just face it, most folks don't have. I don't know how to sew and quilt, but she's teaching her children how to do that, which is another connection to our culture. And then when taking that on and encourage them to explore with inquiry and research to develop living history roles. Now she's going to have the children look at people in their community. They're going to create costumes that represent that person, or a quilt that represents that person. And again, they're going to connect with their community. So this is why I love place-based education. This is why I enjoyed working with Debbie 2 years ago so much, because she understands how that community makes its own, can make its own leaders. And that's very much involved in place-based education.
We looked at in our grant which focuses on place-based learning. So we're looking at our place, our
There it is,
Harlan,
place-based learning.
what Harlan offers and
Yep.
what we want to share with the world. And for us, it's a very connected process. This is our third year of applying for the grant. In the first two, we worked a lot with our coal history, Harlan County coal history. We did a virtual field trip. And it's a very connected process for us because coming off of that, the community got really proud of what our school children were doing, and the kids wanted to know more about their history. So just those first years generated more inquiry and a desire to learn more about local culture.
And I think this is really important. Notice as she said, our community got really excited and our kids wanted to know more. That is very much almost like a symbiotic relationship. Here's the thing, with high stakes testing, so often we shut our doors at the schools and we were like, oh my gosh, we got to focus on this test and we've got to teach. And we were teaching content that like we said, is that broader scale, that broader narrative, which is great because we have to know about our nation. We have to know about the world. But now that we've opened those school doors and we've brought the community in to share their knowledge, to let us know who we are and why we are, okay? Well, now that we've done that, notice that she said the community got excited. When the community gets excited, they're going to support our efforts even more. This is the very element of social emotional learning, creating that community feel. Students feel connected and protected. The community feels supportive of these efforts. I love the pictures, and I'm sure you guys are going to see that. I love the pictures that she's included here. So now she's really, she started with that little Harlan County. They looked at the community of Lynch. Then they made it a little bit broader with Harlan County, and now they're really connecting with even bigger ideas within their community and community organizations. And wow, I mean, I'm just blown away. This is phenomenal.
They expressed the need they'd like to make those masks for others. And so that got us kind of focusing in on what about the part of our culture of sewing and quilting and what a legacy that's been for our past and how can we carry that on. So we knew that quilting could bring cultural pride. And at one point, someone suggested, why don't we donate some quilts to some veterans? And so that is where our grant was born, with the idea that we could carry on this culture and learn a skill like quilting that also has an economic side to it.
Okay, so let's talk about just that whole thing there. And you guys, as you were, listening to her and as you see what she was talking about, is that how she was talking to the kids. That's the very element of inquiry. That when the students bring their instructional need into the learning, that is good inquiry. And now, you see how she was talking about how, they're going to connect to their culture. And then those students were the ones who extended it. This is a taking action component. It was the students who extended it and said, well, why don't we make these masks for others? And while we're at it making these masks, let's make quilts for the veterans, to express our gratitude and everything. I think one thing about this, I think this is the beauty, and I'm going to say this out loud, I think this is the beauty of us being Appalachian, people. We are so connected to our place. It is the very element of who we are, and because it is, we think of others. But I think what's really beautiful about this is notice how Debbie responded to the COVID situation of students staying at home. But guess what? They were spending more time with their grandparents, spending more time with their parents. She immediately capitalized on that and said, you know what? We're going to, that's a historical, I mean, our parents and grandparents are, let's think of them as historical sources. They've been a witness to history. Let's bring their knowledge, their wisdom into the learning, and that's what she's done with this.
So our community kind of learned what was going on, and they got behind us and loved the project. And so one little boy and girl whose grandmother sewed loved the idea so good that she started her own quilt and made an extra one. She said, when your class gets ready to donate these, here's an extra one for you. And I guess she shared her story with others, and the kids were sharing their story. And we eventually got a new.
I think what's exciting about this slide, when she says, are our outcomes proving an innovation succeeding, or did it prove that the innovation succeeded? And notice how she has yes, 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 yes. And I think that that's a real response to the way that the community and her students started interacting. She tells a story of the grandmother who who became aware of the project through her grandchildren, and she said, "Oh my gosh, let me make a quilt for you. And when you guys get ready to do these, you can add the stuffing to it or whatever, finish the quilting and donate that. Let me be part of this." When the community comes in, I mean, when is the last time we heard people from the community coming in and say, "Hey, I hear you guys are doing this, and I want to help, and I want to be part of it." Doesn't happen every day, especially like I said earlier, when you have that high stakes testing and you got to shut the doors to the building and shut the doors to the classroom and get busy. Well, this is, just look at it. This is an exchange. This is all about reaching out to our elders in the community and bringing them into our classrooms. And then that's when the learning gets deeper and so much more robust. So I love it that the students were like, yes, 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 yes.
And a couple of people chose to bring in material. They said, could they donate it? And so I have to share this one really great story that was really inspirational for my kids. A sweet young lady called us. Her grandmother had passed away and loved to quilt. And she has quilts from her grandmother that she cherished. And she asked, could she donate some of her late grandmother's material that was already cut into sections, ready to be quilted. And could she do that in her memory for a legacy? She actually didn't start going back to school until February this year, and it was only on a 3-day-a-week basis. And the extension office won't allow their employees to come in right now, and volunteers in the school system are limited right now because of safety and because of our need to stay 6 feet apart and clean our desks and things. We started out sewing with plastic gloves on. I tried to include a picture later in the PowerPoint that you can see some of the challenges that we face.
Okay, I love how Debbie talks about on this slide right here, talking about emerging leaders and teachers. And I think that's something that's so important because she's talking about the students, not herself. So the fact that these students are coming out of this project, and you'll see on the slide here, she talks about how eventually it was her students that started helping each other with the bobbins and everything on the sewing machines, and the students, because let's face it, this is a form of technology, so kids are going to take to it immediately. So they just stepped right in, and it was classmates that were going over. If somebody said, "Help Mrs. Napier," and they went over and helped. And I think just considering how these students gain such confidence. And they're gaining a skill that now they're not going to have to take their own sewing out, their own pants and stuff like that to be hemmed. They can hem their own pants now. So, that's pretty cool. But I love how she also talks about that the COVID restrictions, while it created a challenge for her classroom, that the students responded and adapted. And that is the mark of a very positive, I would say, an incredibly connected classroom, but most importantly, that is a classroom where social emotional learning thrives, and that's what it's all about.
One little young man who took a sewing machine home one night and came back to me the next day, and he said, "Mrs. Napier, it all came apart, but I used the guides that we created in class." He said, "I fixed the sewing machine," and he was really proud of himself. And this is exactly what we wanted to do, is to learn to use the computer.
Let's talk about empowerment. And that's one thing that she'll talk about on a slide in just a moment, with this. But when she talks about measuring our outcomes, some of those things that she identifies, observations of students' esteem, I think learning a skill and mastering that skill is the best way for a student to develop self-esteem. And that's something that happens here. And then the community input. You've heard numerous stories of folks bringing in grandmother's quilts or grandmothers finding out about it, bringing their quilt in, sending material for people to work with. And then the completion of the sewing products and projects. I think that when that sense of completion is going back to that initial one, is where that self-esteem and that pride really appears. But most importantly, using technology platforms to problem solve. How phenomenal is that? And again, that's a skill that these kids already do every day. If a lock pops out of the door, go to YouTube. They're going to tell you how to put that back in there. And that's something and notice that she also says, though, awesome engagement. That engagement, once again, comes from the students, the student-directed inquiry, the student-directed instructional, ideas. They're going to come in and say, well, why don't we do this? Which goes back to the inquiry. But I think the thing that's most powerful about this is the students were connected with their community, and the community were connected to the students, and they were identifying needs from both sides, and they were feeling worth, and they were feeling an importance, and most of all, that they were making a difference. This is why I love social studies. There are things that you can do with social studies that you can't often do with some of the other content areas. Not that you can't do them, but it's just that when we think about, social studies, that's where we learn to be a citizen. And what does a citizen do? A citizen looks at their community and says, how can I make a difference? What do I need to do to help? And that's what this is. This is so very much communicating conclusions. This is all about that whole idea of taking action that I've mentioned several times within the social studies, and especially when you look at inquiry, that's what this is all about. But notice that what I also love about this slide is that she says measuring our outcomes. Never once has this been her project. Never has she said my project. She has said our project, our grant, our outcomes. That is student and teacher working, or students and teacher working together. And that is what our classrooms must be all about.
I don't know that I've ever enjoyed a project that I've done with the children more. And you would just have to sit in a classroom and watch them work to see what they feel about this. I've had a couple of kids who have hid the quilt pieces they sewed at school one day in their backpacks, so that the next day or the 2 days later when they come back to sew, they don't want somebody else to have added to what they did. They want their quilt pieces to be their quilt pieces.
Yeah. And I've had this last slide where she talks about, it's about the kids. And when you look at her points here, she talks about how the kids got involved and it was fun and engaging. But when you think about what's really happened here, I just love how she just puts it at the top. It's about the kids. She has taken a moment in history that otherwise would have been, and I'm talking about present. I'm not talking about a moment in history that they studied. I'm talking about she's taking this time. These kids will remember this project the rest of their lives. Because what's happened is that she's taken what would have been a very positive, very isolating time period for these kids, that the kids at this point could have been so disconnected. I think there is going to be something that comes out of this, that instead of becoming disconnected, as we hear people, teachers and administrators talking about across the country, kids go home, they turn off the mic, they turn off the camera, and maybe they're sitting there listening, maybe they're not. And teachers are not getting assignments in and that kind of thing. You're not going to see that in this classroom. Because what's happened is that she's come in there, she's realized where they are, which is with their parents and their grandparents. And now she's also realized how they can learn where they are. And then she has extended that, but also focusing their attention and energy, let's just say that out loud, into a project that connects them with their community, that maintains their sense of place and their sense of community and their sense of purpose. And that is so incredibly important in this, in this time of COVID teaching, in terms of distance teaching, distance learning, whatever you want to call it, hybrid, the whole thing. Notice how she talked about that this one kid took his piece home because he wanted to make sure someone else wasn't going to pick it up and continue it, because this was his. That is ownership. But most importantly, this kid knows he doesn't get to keep that quilt piece. So he knows this is his workmanship that is going to be shared with another generation, and most importantly, hopefully going to be around for a very long time. So I think that we have got to do nothing but give kudos to Debbie Napier and that awesome Ross Point Elementary and Harlan County Schools. Let's say that out loud, because they're being innovative. They're saying, you know what? Let's go past the textbook. The textbook is important. I know Debbie is a teacher. She's right there with those kids in the learning. But this project, so much of it was done outside of the classroom, but the kids wanted it. They wanted to do it. So just looking at this, taking this opportunity in this time period to connect with generations, to connect with their community, and most importantly, give them a purpose in that community is just phenomenal. This is not the first time I've watched this, but every time I watch it, I see something new. So I highly encourage all of you guys, go in, and watch this whole thing. Listen to how Debbie, plans, but most importantly, how she brings her students into this project, and then her students take over. And she completely acknowledges that, because I think that one last thing that I think is just incredible about this, the Harlan County Extension Office wasn't able to come in because of COVID restrictions. But notice what, she said, well, so my kids took over. My kids took that leadership role. My kids did the research to find out how to fix a sewing machine, how to load a bobbin, the whole kind of thing. So instead of looking at this project, as she could have at the end, because there was pieces because of COVID that did not get completed, but instead of saying that it failed, she said, we reflected and we're going to extend it. So looking at this and knowing that it's not finished and it's not done makes me even more excited. So, and I know that their kids will be too. So, highly recommend go into that summit stuff there on the holler and absolutely take a look at Debbie Napier and Ross Point Elementary.